Hey, welcome to Watch Complications. I'm Brian. Check out my site, watchcomplications.com. Subscribe here, hit the bell if you want updates, and check out my Instagram at watch_complications. There is a ton of stuff going on here. You can see my desk is a mess. My bench you can't see is an absolute mess. There are all kinds of great videos in the pipeline and content coming to this site. So be watching for things from how a repeater works to custom builds I'm working on and more 3D printing stuff. Just all kinds of good stuff coming, so hang around. So this video is straight to the point. I've got my series on using Waterslide Decals to make custom dials. And I've tested all kinds of things just to give you all some insight into possibilities as you tinker and mod and do other things with watches. And what I wanted to do next was to see what it's like to put multiple layers of decals on top of each other, whether that's to fix some of the inconsistencies you might get with ink transfer, add some depth, maybe a little bit better of a quality look about it, those sort of things. And I wanted to know if the process I was using for that initial layer, using microset and microsole, would work for a second layer or if another approach was needed. This video will make a lot more sense if you go back and watch some of those earlier videos, particularly the Waterslide Decal process that works. I'll put the videos in the description below and also link them here above. What I'm going to do here is follow a similar process in an attempt to put a second decal layer on the dial. Now, my process, I use microset microsole to apply a first layer. Works really well. Better than the glue that comes with decal paper in my testing. And other people will have different types of success, I assume. There's lots of variables out there in terms of decal and dial transfer. But I'm going with what works well for me. What I've discovered in this video, and the testing I did for this video, is that if I want to go about putting a second layer on, or third or fourth layer, is the microset microsole doesn't work that well. Works really great. It's really the best process I've found for that first layer. Usually you can be done with it. But if you're going to go about putting on more layers to either fix inconsistencies, maybe something didn't transfer well, you want to add some depth to the dial, then the microset microsole isn't going to work a second, third, fourth time. What will work okay is using the glues that come with the decal paper. So that's what you're going to see in this video. First half is the failed attempt using microset microsole for a multiple layer, and then the successful attempt at using the decal glue that comes with the paper for adding that second layer. So let's do it. The problem will be aligning this so that it looks right. And for that, I want to make sure that this decal isn't hanging over the edge and getting on the surface of this dial holder, because they tend to stick. So I'm going to drop this in water. I'm going to get my microset and apply it to the surface. So here it is out of the water. I'm going to take the backing off and flip this down on the dial and get some microset on it so it doesn't dry out on me. And now we got to work on getting it aligned. Of course, the trick here is going to be getting it perfectly aligned so it doesn't look weird, because the last thing you want is some sort of like shadow effect. Just from the look of it, I don't think it's going to necessarily fix the Twizzler effect, but it's certainly given depth to the dial. The first time you apply the decal, I left the corners all the way around like this, where you have all the corners and you can use this part, these tabs, to hold and move and manipulate the decal. When you're applying it like this, it's so finicky and those corners want to stick to the surface that you have the dial resting on, that it's very hard to get the perfect alignment. So that's why I cut sort of as much of a circle so the decal's sitting only on the surface of the dial, so you can easily move it and manipulate every single part of the decal individually. I mean, it is so easy to move that. Like if you take just this section, if you just wipe your finger just a little bit, just that, number infinity, that will get off. If you just rub your finger the wrong way on that section, even though the rest might be perfectly aligned, I'm just showing you, see how easy that can be. It can be aligned in certain places and not in others. It's like I can change this, the thickness of this circle
by just moving my finger. So again, I'm learning the pros and cons of doing this. I think if I was really concerned about a dial, I might just hope for a really good first layer and leave it at that.
So for me, right now, the lesson learned on applying multiple layers is it can certainly give it visually more depth, but it's very finicky to get perfectly aligned and very easy to move and get one little piece out of alignment. So if you have a complex design, it's going to make it, that much harder. Second is it's not really going to fix the aliasing that you have around certain sections. It does knock a little bit off that Twizzler effect, but doesn't make it perfect, but it does help a little bit. So even though you can see the individual orange and yellow portions of this sort of lighter color here at 9, it still at least adds a little bit more depth to it. Right, now that that's on there, I'm going to do the micro sole.
I'm going to wipe this really carefully because I don't want to drag the decal around. I'm just softening it in place. It'll make the color appear more vibrant too. I'm going to let this dry for 10-15 minutes.
Of course, as this dries, this is going to look like it's bubbling up. That's okay. That's normal. I followed the process I had in earlier videos where I put the dial in the oven at about 225 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. I wasn't sure if this would work at all or how well. What I was a little surprised by is that it didn't work at all. The ink stayed on the transfer paper and did not adhere to the dial at all. Now, this could be for a variety of reasons. I'm using microset and microsole for this second layer, but this really shows the difference between microset and microsole for that first layer versus potentially using something like a glue on any layer, the first or multiple layers after that, such as a second or third layer. But it's worth noting that all of the ink stayed on the transfer paper. Okay, so applying a second layer did not work. I wonder if that's because the ink won't adhere to another location that has other ink. I followed the exact same process as I did when I applied the first layer. So I find that pretty interesting. What I'm going to do is try it with the glue that comes with type B paper.
The recommendation for this is to either let it air dry once you've applied the decal, or you could apply some heat if you want. I think the trick with this one is to keep any potential debris, fibers and stuff off of the surface when you go to glue this on. Okay, so I've coated that with the glue. Now pull the decal out of the water. Slide that off. And place it down. And again, this should be fairly movable for a little bit. Forgiving. Have to work on alignment. And at some point here, it should almost snap into place, which is kind of what I've got here. I just gotta get the air bubbles out. That was actually a lot less finicky than the other way. Again, so all of these lines and stuff, areas of the decal can move fairly independently, particularly if pieces of the edge are sealed down and you kind of pull to one side. So you gotta be kind of careful. Again, just like the first time, it looks like it has a lot more depth to it now that it has this second layer on there. But at the same time, is that going to adhere very well? Guess we'll see, huh?
Well, that actually worked really, really well. I'm happy with that. I mean, it was easy to get right into place. It gave you enough time to move it. Didn't really have to work at it like I did with the previous attempt and approach. Now, I've
tested and done some decal application of the initial layer with the glues and stuff, and they just haven't worked as well as the Microset Microsole for that first application. Maybe if you get to this multiple application where you want to do 2, 3, 4 layers to give depth and more color to the printing, maybe the glue is the better approach. So the real test will be letting this dry and seeing if the ink stays on the decal paper or stays on the dial. Now we just have to wait. The instructions for these non-glossy surfaces say to wait about 4 hours, or you could apply heat if you want to, not necessary, but the longer you let it dry or the more you dry it, if you apply a little bit of heat, it may adhere better. So I might put a little bit of heat on it and I'll let it have several hours to dry. All right, so I've let this thing dry overnight actually, didn't want to mess with it. And then I also put a little bit of heat with a hair dryer on it. So should be good and dry. Again, this is just to see if a second layer of a decal can go on top of the first. So let's see if this colored decal will stay on here. So I'm going to get an edge here, and I can tell you, I've just pulled up this little lip, and what you can't see is ink on the decal, which means it's adhered to the dial. Good sign. Pop in here a little bit closer for you, and I will start peeling this back. Now what we're going to have that's different than laying the first layer is that since I used the glue, we might have some residue. I'll show you what that looks like. You can see it around the edge of the dial, but let me get this off of here first. Again, I'll show before and after pictures. It looks like a few little pieces of the ink are coming up with the decal, but most of it has adhered. There we go. So you can see a few little bits there stayed, but that's fine, not a big deal. So hey, it worked. Show you the dial. You can see like here around the edge, that's some of that glue residue, like right here. And that's around the edge of the dial, so you can kind of wipe it off like that. It kind of falls off. It's this sort of transparent white sort of color. And so you'll have that maybe around the edge. Take a brush or something of some sort. See the glue kind of came around the back of the dial a little bit. So there'd be a little bit of cleanup, you know, after using the glue. The surface may have a little bit more of a matte look. You can kind of see it there because of the glue, but still a nice looking dial. And I think the point here of why you can do this, or why you might think about doing it, is so you can add more depth of color. You can do, I'm assuming you can do as many layers as you want, keep adding depth to it. It might eventually help with alleviating some of the Twizzler effect. It kind of did on this pinkish color over here. You still get the orange yellow look on this color. So depending on what specific colors you're talking about or what angles lines might be at, you might get different sort of looks. All right, so let's do a before and after picture. And so here's what it looked like with just the first layer. And you can see what it looks like with now a second layer. So there is a process that does work. Hopefully you will give that a test yourself, see how it goes, and hopefully you find this video helpful.
Well, this is why I test things. You never know exactly until you actually design or try or engineer something. You just got to test it out, see what happens, got to do the experiment. So there you go. If you are going to add multiple layers to a dial, use the glue that comes with the decal paper to do that. I would still recommend Microset Microsole approach for a single layer, and usually that's plenty. But if you want to start adding more layers for whatever reasons, again, depth, fixing inconsistencies, you don't want to start over from scratch again. Maybe something didn't work out quite perfectly the way you wanted to. Again, there's that Twizzler effect. Or you can add gradients, right? That could be another good reason to do multiple layers. Well, Now you know a way that might be better to approach that issue if you're doing that sort of tinkering. That's that. If you want more information and content, photos, and other information, check out the site watchcomplications.com. Subscribe here and hit the bell if you want updates, and stay in tune with what's going on here with video releases at Watch Complications. And you want some daily pics, Instagram, watch_complications. I'm Brian. I am out.